In 1754, Danish King Frederick V became the first monarch in Northern Europe to establish and sponsor an Academy of Fine Art. He was inspired by the example of Louis XIV of France, who founded the first monarch-sponsored art academy in 1648. The school moved to the Louvre following the king's relocation to Versailles in 1682. Not only were classes held at the Louvre, but professors received living accommodations there as well. The Academy's 22 founding members included France's most accomplished artists, including Charles Lebrun, who was responsible for the painting program in the newly constructed palace at Versailles, 14 miles southwest of Paris. In that era of absolute monarchs, the founders established a rigid organizational hierarchy, with the director at the top and students at the bottom, as well as a curricular hierarchy. They divided painting, the most prestigious of the visual arts, into 5 categories. At the top was history painting, which included subjects from history, religion, mythology, and literature. It required artists to have a broad-based education so they could imagine and invent the situations they were asked to portray. The next most important category was portraiture, which was also focused on humans, but only required excellent copying skills and an understanding of anatomy. Third was genre, paintings of the everyday life of unimportant individuals. Fourth was landscape, nature in action, which required refined observational skills and good judgment to know the best way to arrange views and to know what to add and what to delete. The last category was still life, dead, unmoving nature, assumed to be the least challenging because it required no invention on the part of the artist. Drawing was the foundational skill that had to be learned before all else, and students began by drawing after sculptures in the royal collection. Once they had mastered that, students were promoted to life drawing the nude male form, the bedrock of all Academy-trained artists. In this way, Louis XIV ensured a cadre of highly skilled artists with a shared sense of aesthetic values. Hi, I'm Michelle Fakos. I've been lecturing and writing about Nordic art for decades, and am both an American and a Swedish citizen living part-time in Stockholm. I'm excited to share with you my research gleaned from books, journals, letters, and conversations with other experts. I know how hard it is to read, to find out about Scandinavian art, because I had to learn to read Danish, Norwegian, Swedish, and German to do it. Now let's discover more about the Copenhagen Academy. As early as 1701, artists began petitioning the Danish king to establish such a prestigious art academy in Denmark, since anything, well, almost anything, that happened in France was eagerly imitated elsewhere. As in France, the Danish Royal Academy was housed in a royal palace, Charlottenborg, in the nation's capital, where it still resides. In order to ensure that the strict standards of the French Academy would be upheld, Frederick V hired the French sculptor Jacques Sally as director in 1755. Sally was one of France's premier sculptors. Trained at the French Academy, Sally won a prestigious scholarship to study for 8 years at the French Academy's outpost in Rome, at just the moment when excavations at Herculaneum and Pompeii had begun. In Rome, Sally studied original works of classical Greek and Roman sculpture in the Vatican collection, as well as the exciting finds unearthed in the cities buried by ash discharged by Mount Vesuvius in 79. Earlier, Danish art students had learned about classical sculpture from engravings, whose two-dimensionality hampered a nuanced understanding of three-dimensional objects. Salih vastly improved the situation by commissioning plaster casts of famous sculptures so students could study them in 3 dimensions at first hand, at home. The rigorous academy curriculum also included anatomy, history, perspective, philosophy, and religion, and later mathematics. And Salih donated his personal library as the foundation for the Academy's own library, which is still located in Charlottenborg Palace. The faculty, described at the time as having more famous international artists than any other art academy, had professors hailing from France, Germany, and Sweden, as well as Denmark. The Swedish painter Carl Gustav Pilot emigrated to Copenhagen in 1741 because the portraiture market there was far more robust than in Stockholm. A few years later, in 1747, King Frederick V appointed him to painter to the royal court, a position that included the supervision of decorations for all royal palaces. In 1748, Pilot became a professor at the Drawing and Painting Academy, predecessor to the Royal Danish Academy of Art, where he taught until 1772. 1772 was a pivotal year in Danish history. It was the moment that Denmark suddenly decided to rid itself of all foreign influence, from schools, newspapers, and most of all, government. Until that year, the middle and upper classes were German-speaking, and German was the language used for official government documents. This is partly explained by the fact that Denmark included a large tract of German-speaking territory, the provinces of Schleswig and Holstein, and the city of Altona, now a suburb of Hamburg. And also by the fact that German universities had better reputations than Danish ones. There was a saying at the time that Danish aristocrats spoke German to each other, French to their mistresses, and Danish to their peasants, but no more. The triggering event was a Struensee affair. Johann Friedrich Struensee, a German medical doctor from Hamburg, distinguished himself by successfully treating the schizophrenia of the Danish king, Christian VII. In 1772, Struensee was executed for treason. His crime was not the fact that he fell in love and produced a daughter with a lonely young queen, an English princess of German extraction, but that he used his position to influence the king to enact democratizing reforms opposed by the nobility. They conspired with the king's stepmother to convict the well-meaning Struensee of treason. He was first beheaded, a merciful act, and then drawn and quartered. The unfaithful queen was sent back to her German residence, the ducal palace in Celle, without her children. Christian then became a puppet ruler until his death in 1808, with the nobility forming an alliance with his stepmother, the Dowager Queen, to eliminate German influence from the bureaucracy and educational institutions. In order to protect the nation from foreign control, they promoted a generic concept of Danish national identity through archaeology, art, botany, literature, and theater, now performed exclusively in Danish. Struensee's reform that tasked the Academy with equipping all Danish citizens with good taste through the obligatory training of all Denmark's apprentice artisans in the finer points of drawing was maintained by the new regime. Pilot's successor as director was the Danish sculptor Johannes Wiedewelt. Wiedevelt's father, Just, had been court sculptor and was Johannes's first teacher. In 1750, Wiedewelt went to Paris, where he studied with the renowned Guillaume Cousteau the Younger and won a second-place medal at the French Royal Academy exhibition in 1753. The following year, Wiedewelt won one of the Danish Academy's first study abroad scholarships and moved to Rome, the epicenter of a revival in an interest in antiquity, since excavations at Herculaneum in Pompeii had begun in 1738. In Rome, he lived among the large expat community of Germans and Scandinavians, attracted by an eager, largely English clientele, and that was active in the Italian capital for decades. During the second 2 years of his stay, from 1756 to 58, he shared a studio apartment with the so-called father of neoclassicism, Johann Joachim Winckelmann, with whom he likely had a romantic relationship. Winckelmann was the German curator and librarian to Rome's most important art collector, the Cardinal Albani. While still in Dresden, and before he ever even saw an original work of ancient art, Winckelmann wrote the catalytic essay of the neoclassical movement, Reflections on the Imitation of Greek Works in Painting and Sculpture, which was published in 1755. Wiedewelt embraced his friend's ideas and incorporated them into the Royal Academy's curriculum when he became director in 1772. According to Winckelmann, the most prominent characteristic of ancient art was noble simplicity and calm grandeur, a quality found in Wiedewelt's symmetrical Roman sarcophagus-style tomb for King Frederick V, undoubtedly inspired by the papal tomb designed by Italian Baroque master Giancarlo Bernini for St. Peter's in Rome. Simplicity, calm, and grandeur also typify Wiedewelt's 54 extraordinarily modernist memorials to Great Danes, the humankind, that dot the pathways of Jägerspris Park near Copenhagen. Upon his return to Copenhagen, Wiedewelt was named a professor at the Danish Academy and succeeded his father as court sculptor. He served 3 non-consecutive terms and was succeeded by the painter Jens Juel in 1796. Juel served 2 non-consecutive terms, ending in 1801, and continued to inculcate Winckelmann's neoclassical ideas into Copenhagen Academy students, as did his successors. In fact, at no other art academy in Europe were students so thoroughly steeped in the principles of Winckelmann. This resulted in the emergence of an identifiable Danish style, characterized by restrained emotion, clear, limpid lighting, and careful attention to detail. As a professor, Juel is best known as the teacher of the German Romantic painters Caspar David Friedrich and Philipp Otto Runge, both natives of the Baltic province of Pomerania, which in the late 18th century was controlled by Sweden. Although mainly in demand as a portrait painter, Juel was a nature lover and was particularly attracted to landscape, a situation that elevated the status of landscape painting, thereby paving the way for later generations. Juel's successor and pupil, Nikolai Abildgaard, maintained the Academy standards already in effect for half a century, a task facilitated by scholarships that enabled many of Denmark's best-known 19th century artists and future Academy professors to study in Rome. As a student, he assisted with paintings in Fredensborg Palace, and as professor, he taught mythology and anatomy in addition to painting. As the royal historical painter, he completed historical scenes for Christiansborg Palace, most of which were destroyed by a fire in 1794. That same year, under Wiedeweld's tenure, the Academy held its third exhibition. The infrequency with which the Academy held public exhibitions became a major impediment for artists in subsequent decades, since these exhibitions were the most important, often only, opportunity artists had to showcase their works to the public, an increasingly significant source of income for artists as government patronage declined. Denmark's most renowned neoclassical sculptor was Bertel Thorvaldsen, who, as a student, assisted Abildgaard on the decoration of Christiansborg Palace. He moved to Rome in 1796 and didn't return to Denmark until 1838. He was the chief rival of Italian neoclassical sculptor Antonio Canova, although Canova's works tended toward the glossy and sensual, whereas Thorvaldsen's, as you see here, seemed the incarnation of classical Greek restraint. Like his predecessors, Thorvaldsen enforced the Winckelmannian agenda of noble simplicity and calm grandeur that had dominated for almost a century by the time Thorvaldsen assumed Academy directorship in 1833. The easily identifiable Danish painting style that developed after 1815 among Academy students came to be known as the Danish Golden Age, not to be confused with the 17th century Dutch Golden Age, which featured Rembrandt, Ruysdael, and Vermeer. The so-called father of Danish painting was Professor Christopher Wilhelm Eckersberg, who served as Academy director from 1827 to 1829. In addition to studying at the Copenhagen Academy, Eckersberg studied in Paris in 1811 and 12 with Jacques-Louis David, France's premier neoclassical painter. As a professor at the Copenhagen Academy, Eckersberg introduced a new pedagogical style, taking students on sketching expeditions in nature and encouraging each to find their own personal artistic voice. Nonetheless, Eckersberg believed drawing fundamentals were essential to becoming a good artist. His 1841 essay, Linear Perspective Used in the Art of Painting, was required reading for all Academy students. Conflict between students and the Academy escalated during the 19th century, partly because teaching methods hadn't changed substantially since the mid-18th century, and partly because exhibitions were held only sporadically, making it difficult for artists to respond to the interest of the contemporary art market and to show their work to potential clients. Finally, in 1891, anti-establishment artists founded the Free Exhibition, which was the name of both the secessionist organization as well as of the exhibition it held annually for more than 130 years. If you're interested in learning more about individual artists or the secessionist movement that challenged the Academy's dominance in the Danish art world, subscribe to this channel and stay tuned for videos uploaded on the 10th, 20th, and 30th of each month. And if you enjoyed this content, please hit the thumbs up button. Leave comments and questions in the section below, and check out my website for related articles, books, lectures, and blog posts. What would you like to learn about Nordic art?